Good evening. This is the Policy Committee, and it's Tuesday, October the 17th. We are in the administration, and it is what, 5:30? Did we do that on time?
Yep.
Okay. So I will call the roll. Van Twyver is here. Miss O'Hensey
I'm here.
on the phone. Mr. Mosier?
I'm here on the phone.
On the phone. Mr. Hallowell is our alternate.
Here?
Miss Fitzpatrick is here. Dr. Mosley is here. Mr. Kennedy, Miss Donovan, and Miss Coutu. Coutu? From Guidance.
Yes.
Okay, folks, we have a unique situation. Oops, and Mr. Farrington.
And Mr.
Farrington.
Kaufman.
And Mr. Kaufman. I knew it. Well, I have this thing. I figure once I get through my list here, I'm done, you know? So let's just speak up. Okay, sorry about that. Maybe I'll only have to do this a few more times. Okay, we have a very unique situation here tonight. We have two people, two of our regular members are calling in over the phone. Because of that, they are allowed to participate. They are not counted towards the quorum for us to have business tonight, but they are allowed to participate and vote. So we have Mr. Hallowell here, who is the alternate, and so he will have the vote tonight. But we can only have 3 voters, so we need to have, let me read you what the lawyer said about this, because I was wondering. The provisions of RSA Chapter 91-A that permit a public body to allow members to participate by telephone requires that a quorum of the body be physically present. From that, I conclude that throughout the meeting, the physically present alternate who makes up the quorum must be a member of the body and allowed to participate, including voting. 2 members present meeting the quorum requirement necessary means that the body includes a maximum of 3 persons. If both telephoning members are allowed to vote, that would mean the body is comprised of 4 persons, and the quorum requirement that a majority be physically present would not be met. Accordingly, I conclude that both telephoning members cannot be permitted to vote. The board may wish to adopt rules to determine which phoning member is to vote, or a rule to require that should the situation arise, the meeting be rescheduled. So I would like to suggest that we take a lottery. I'll have, if this is agreeable, I'll have our assistant superintendent pick a number, and then to write it down, and then we'll ask each of the
number between 1 and 1.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
one between
She was
1
starting to write down a
1 and 9,909. No, 1 and 10. Between
Okay.
1 and 10. Is
Okay.
that suitable? And that each of our telephoning members pick a number between 1 and 10, and the one that comes closest to the number that our assistant has suggested.
We're the first one to get it, because there's going to be multiple choices. It might not be the first time.
No, it's the closest one. Either if
Oh,
you
the
either hit the
closest
number
to
or
that
the
number.
closest
Okay,
to her number.
okay, that'll be
Okay.
fine.
And she can determine closest, because you know
I don't know
what?
how you get yourself into these problems.
So,
I don't know, I said yes and signed this as the paper to be a committee member.
15. It's 15.
Yeah.
okay, so, do you have
What?
about who's gonna give me a number first?
Oh,
Well, let's do it alphabetically, so.
Okay.
Start with
Okay.
Doris?
I want to be,
Oh, no, Bob.
It wouldn't matter.
Right?
no,
Bill,
no,
I don't need to
Bob.
give it.
William,
It has to come from those two.
First name or last name?
Just.
Doris, would you give us a number between 1 and 10?
Who did you ask?
Doris?
Doris, can we have a number between 1 and 10?
5.
Okay.
Number 5.
Okay.
Bill?
All right, 7.
ooh.
Yeah, I gave 3 because that's what you need for voting. I picked 3.
Okay,
Three?
Bill, it
Yeah,
sounds like,
no, Doris is the closest.
Oh, I thought we were going to keep doing it till we have a number.
Oh,
Well, that's
no,
what
I
I
said
thought
whoever was
originally.
closest.
closest.
Like I
Okay.
sunk
All
your
right,
battleship.
Doris, you're the winner.
So I used logic to pick 3.
Oh.
All right, Doris, you're on the voting team.
Okay.
Sorry, Bill.
Okay.
Next time.
You gotta get better, Bill, so you can be here in person.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a lot of work tonight to do, so let's get started. In deference to our superintendent, we're going to take his policy KHB, advertising and sponsorships in schools first, so that he can go to other more important.
So that
Task.
policy came from the finance committee.
It did come from the finance committee. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Yeah, but I guess it was part of considering a request by the superintendent. Okay, so that is, what do I do with it?
I think it was kind of a combination of different things. I think it was if I can kind of
Yes, you may. It's KHB, advertising sponsorship in schools.
would you like me to speak to it?
Yes, please.
So the idea is to, this came as a result of a conversation that the board chair, Mr. Farrington, and I had some discussions with some local businesses, particularly BAE, around naming and some supports that they would like to support the schools in terms of plaques, recognition, and how is the best way for us to, I would say, discriminate between like a signed BAE and what's the word I'm looking for? Display something that recognizes BAE but not be overwhelming to the point where we're trying to espouse the company's model or something like that. So what I'm looking for this policy is some flexibility and some discretion in terms of what we can accept from local businesses. So there was a situation at the Charlotte School, the elementary school, Charlotte Ave, around their playground, and particularly that they were getting some sponsorships from local businesses as well. So it's a combination of those two events that really is the driving force of this policy. So a couple of things that I'm thinking about is that I really like the language around sponsorship. I made some minor edits in terms of advertising. I'm sorry, let me just tell you where I'm at. Definition. It says advertising is defined as the payment of money or other economic, I just put benefits, but I think everything else is pretty straightforward for that part.
Excuse me, sir, you're recommending we strike the word economic?
No, I just put the word benefits.
You just made it plural.
Okay,
But
benefits.
for some reason, it's not highlighted in red, because it would be a change.
And it's not changed in the
No.
one we have, right?
Right.
I read it over again.
Oh, sorry.
Okay,
just-
so you want to add the word S, add the letter S?
Right.
Okay.
Sorry.
We modify whatever we talk about usually.
So you want me to,
No, that's
We'll keep
quite, you
going.
did it right.
No, we
Okay.
just keep track of what,
I'll
we
keep,
probably, we won't, you typically vote on each individual.
no, we
That's what you're
don't,
saying.
but I do review
We'll go
the
back.
changes.
the other thing that I saw that would be just kind of given what I call some flexibility and some discretion, where it says advertising is also permitted. And it says in yearbooks, school papers, newspapers, excuse me, and then I put comma, and I put school publications.
Where are you? I'm sorry, I'm not following you.
Under advertising,
Bottom of the first page.
On the definition?
no,
Nope.
under that, it says advertising.
Is also permitted in yearbooks, school newspapers,
The bulleted list.
Oh, down the bottom, okay.
and then I wrote down school publications, because I think it would be nice to kind of have some flexibility in terms of what's a school publication. Sometimes what we talked about BAE is that they do our oceanography course. What I'd like to be able to do is recognize their donation because they're sponsoring equipment within that program. So I would like to say something to the point of, and again, I'm paraphrasing, this program was made possible through the sponsorship of BAE, and just have something that acknowledges them because they're giving us quite a bit of donation for that particular program.
So where do you see, in the bulleted item, the first in the bulletin?
I have my, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Ms. Van
We-
Twyver, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
well, I'm gonna capture what you tell us because it has to go in. We have to approve it.
So in the first bullet, if I can interject, where in the first bullet, under advertising is also permitted, the first bullet should read, in yearbooks, school newspapers, comma, school publications, comma, and programs of school-related events.
Okay.
So school publications would be like the program of studies, for your
Yes.
example?
But I didn't want to
The
be
board.
very specific, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just, that's an example. The board does vote on the program of studies, but you know, don't have a problem putting it in here.
I didn't want to, the genesis of my thought process on this is that I didn't, it could be something else. It could be a program of study for the CTE program. It could be a flyer going home. I don't know, you know, but I would certainly, if BAE is going to give us some funding for a program, I think they might, I just thought it would give us some flexibility.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'll say is, so advertising is typically somebody's paying you to put their ad in there, whereas I guess I would argue it's more recognition than advertising. I'm not really sure it's in the right place, I guess. I don't have a problem with, I guess I don't necessarily have a problem with the language. I guess, well, so maybe I do, because we're not going to sell advertising space in the program of studies, I'm guessing.
No, no.
I have a
I-
question too, because school publications, we've never allowed, I don't think we've ever allowed,
Can I'm sorry.
yeah. I don't think I've seen public advertising, but this has been here for a while, so we must.
Well, we certainly do
Advertise it
we
in
certainly
school
do it in
newspapers.
yearbooks.
Huh? In
We certainly do
yearbooks.
it in yearbooks.
But do we do it in school newspapers? I've never seen,
Sometimes we do. In high schools, you do,
maybe,
absolutely.
in
Yeah.
high schools, but not this high school, these high schools.
I don't,
Have you?
I don't know, I can't recall actually, but
Because I
it's
got
possible.
after the athletic director for putting on our website advertising, so.
What I mean, maybe I'm using the wrong example as BAE. So
Uh-huh.
maybe if we just kind of put that aside, and I would just say, like a local business might want to advertise or donate some advertisement space in our maybe yearbook, our school newspaper. Okay.
It's entirely conceivable that local businesses would contribute to a music programs.
Like at the Christmas. or
Right,
at the,
and
winter.
so they,
Like a program?
a program, thank you. So that would be a school publication, and it's entirely possible that schools would advertise in there to support the publication and to support the concert.
But that's accounted for currently.
Yeah, it says programs of school-related events.
Oh, okay, so school publications would be
So-
separate then.
Yeah, go ahead,
Thank you.
mister.
So, does that include the newsletters that we have?
I
So,
don't know.
my guess is probably not,
I
but
don't think so.
just asking the question, because they are publications from the school district.
It does say school newspapers here.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody's ever challenged that before.
So I might suggest that what you're trying to get at for at least the BAE example, so the same language is used under sponsorships. It says maybe recognizing yearbooks, school newspapers, and programs of school-related events. That is where the school publications should probably be.
Okay. So recognition, to know where you're at. I'm looking
Under-
at your screen.
Under
Next page.
Page
above
2,
recognition and another page.
Oh, okay.
So there's
Right here?
under sponsorships. No, I guess, is that crossed
Mine
out
is-
in here?
Mine is different.
no, mine's underlined. Right?
Yeah, yours is crossed out.
Mine's crossed out. sponsorships? The first one on page 1?
Oh, page 1 is.
Yes.
But he moved it.
He moved
But if you
it.
go
Well,
down
that's
to
all right.
page 2,
Or,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, yeah, so go to the next page. So that line gets repeated
Yes.
here. I moved it just because it didn't make sense to be in
Okay.
that
It's the
particular
exact same
location.
language.
So it's the same language, but sponsorships are defined more like you just described the BAE.
I
Thing.
see.
Now, if you're trying to make it so that people can pay for advertising in other school publications, that seems like a different thing.
Well, let me hit it back at you. What I'm trying to do is, we have some very detailed, like in yearbooks, school newspapers, and programs of school-related events. So what we don't know, there could be other school publications that are not listed here. So what I'm asking and proposing is giving some flexibility around school publications. And there's no, by keeping it school publication, it gives, in this case, not myself, but perhaps the principal, some flexibility in terms of looking at, we don't really know what, there may be no plays, or there may be several plays that warrant an advertising opportunity.
But those are programs of school-related events.
Yeah, I would suggest that too. What I usually do is go through the changes that we have here and see if anybody has any problem with them, or, and then we can think about that a little while longer.
Yeah, what else you
Okay.
got?
Okay.
So the change,
Let's not get stuck on that.
All right.
yeah, we'll go through that and
The one thing I put out, and I was messing around with the language, and please, I was thinking out loud here for a second. I put down, the Nashua School District reserves the right to remove sponsorship, or I would say plaques, in the event of, and what I'm trying to do is, again, just thinking out loud here for a second, is that there could be something that happens in the news, something catastrophic, where, there's a crisis at, I don't know, I'm just using something at the top of my head, the monitoring store of hamburgers or something like that. And
Post
so,
office.
and so with that said, we may want to say, and, you call me up and say, listen, we need to take this plaque off of our front of our building or somewhere in the building, and may need to do that ASAP. And so there's no real language in this policy that has anything to do with the removal of sponsorships. So I put that out there. I don't really have any strong language that I'm married to, but I just thought it would be helpful to include something along those lines.
And where were you suggesting putting that?
I had it, when you're just kind of thinking out, I had it under or above the National Board of Education policy. So on this page, right here, I just put a draft of some
Oh,
language.
that's, the page mark is incorrect there, but, I see what you're saying.
So do you only want it to be relative to the advertising? Or would you also want to be able to revoke sponsorship or recognition? So like, company donates something and then we find out that company's done something really bad. I think that's kind of
Yeah.
your example. They might have also donated something like some piece of equipment that we now have a plaque. Do we want to be able to rescind that, or do we only make that restriction on advertising?
I would say that I would be looking for, that's a good question. I would like to have the option of both, to be honest with you. I think we have to allow some flexibility and discretion.
Yeah, so I might suggest that it makes more sense for it to be up at the top, either up at the top or right at the bottom. I'm not really sure which. Maybe after definitions, there could be a right to rescind or something.
I'm not married to, okay, I'm sorry. I'm not married.
So I mean, the language you have might be fine, I'm just saying where we locate it, just to make it clear that it accounts for everything, not just advertising.
Ms. Van Tyler?
Yes.
So I just want to check, so you're saying potentially where the first sponsorship is crossed out, the right to rescind would be appropriate there?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So where are you saying now?
Right after.
Page one.
on
Page
Page
one.
one, after the 4 definitions,
Yep.
but before where it now
The
says
red?
advertising.
Yes.
It would say right to rescind in bold and underlined,
Mhm.
and then the language you have, we'll come up with some language.
I'm not married to any language, I'm sorry, I'm not married to a location, I just think we should have some language around.
The right to rescind.
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Kaufman,
Thank you. So I like the idea. I think we should have that in there. It covers more of the bases, as it were. I think it should be generic for the entire policy and not limited to just specifically advertising or sponsorships. But at the same time, I want to say, if a company donates and gives something to us and then they go out of business, let's say, it's just, and those things happen, I would not rescind that. I mean, I think good works is good works, and they should be acknowledged for what they did when they did it. And I think for us to rescind should require review of the board upon recommendation perhaps by the superintendent, but I don't think it should be taken lightly. And we want to encourage people to donate things. So, and I think that was one of the driving forces behind these modifications to this particular policy, was to really make it easier for the for the community to contribute to us. The folks at Charlotte Avenue, their proposal on that playground, professional, right down to the last proposal and all the details they had. And we wanted to encourage that kind of tongue-tied tonight, folks. Participation by the PTOs. I was already into the next P, and that's where I got hung up. So, that I would offer that kind of thought to the language that gets put in here.
did you have other things that you wanted to?
Yes.
Can you have language there, can you just say that? I'm just trying to write.
Yeah, I was
what
going
I
to say,
think
if
we
you
put
want this
there.
passed tonight, maybe we
Oh,
can have the language.
okay, yeah. All right.
Do you want me to try?
I could, okay, so this is a draft, so along the lines of the Nashua School District, reserves the right to rescind / remove, and then I put sponsorship and advertisement if the district deems, and that's where I stopped. And just thinking out.
That's a key point to stop, because I'm trying to figure out that exact language, like, how do we?
Inappropriate, or, and I guess I'm just thinking, I'm gonna jump back to Howard's suggestion. It could be something that's very generic, it doesn't have to be as elaborate of what I was proposing. Let me just think about the sentence for a second. The district reserves the right to rescind or remove any sponsorships / advertisements from outside agencies.
I think you hit the nail pretty much on the head there. My thought on that is to put that piece of information at the end of the policy. After you have gone through what we're batting around the bush here, and thinking about a little piece of language. I think what we should do is go through and start off with a list of definitions, and et cetera. Follow up with, what, determines the sponsorship, what is advertising. Sponsorship does not necessarily mean that it's paid advertising, or that there's a product that's been donated because of it. But that can be explained in the definitions. But I think that when we get to the end of it, the end of the policy, with on the second page here, where it's outlined in red.
So, Bill, you're suggesting just the topic of rescinding be put at the back and at the bottom of the...
Yes.
You're not recommending any other change to that wording?
You're getting hung up on the language and where to put it, etc. And that's not the idea. The idea is that let's get the idea of what is the sponsorship, what is the advertising, and the rules of the advertising, and then the last blurb on the paper. Or that the
Yeah, I agree with
reserve
that.
all rights to exclude this product or company,
Okay.
or rescind it, whatever word you want to use, and put that at the end, and then that takes care of a whole bunch of things. Instead of sitting here and beating around the bush on where to put it and what to say and how to explain it. It's very simple. When you want to get rid of something, what are you doing? You toss it out. And by rescinding an item, we can do that right at the end.
Okay, Bill.
Board policy, we can do this.
All right. Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. So if I may propose a couple of changes.
Fine.
And in front of the text that Dr. Mosley suggested. So this is the sentence, I'm suggesting a sentence in front, but I'll read what would be the whole paragraph. Upon the recommendation of the superintendent, with the approval of the Board of Ed, the Nashua School District reserves the right to rescind or remove any advertising or sponsorship recognition from outside agencies.
That's very nicely. Thank you, Howard.
Leaves it kind of open as to why you might do it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
The superintendent obviously
Yeah,
has to
exactly.
have a good reason to want to do it, and we want to, I think the board's hand in that is to ensure that it's for the right reason. So I think that's consistent with the intent that we were trying to get to.
Yeah, no, I think that's good, because that's what I was struggling with. How do you word the rationale for why you would rescind something, and that just,
And we don't know, we just reserve the right to,
Yeah.
so.
So did you have anything else on
I
the?
I would agree with Mr. Mosier, I kind of like it at the end.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
he's
I
right.
think
yeah.
that makes sense.
Because
Okay,
it's
so
kind of a
let's-
downer at the very beginning to say, by the way, you're going to do all this.
By the
Well,
way,
oh, excuse me, one
Okay, I do
other
have one
thing.
more
Wait a
thing.
minute, huh?
I do have one more thing. This similar language should probably show up in any contract that we might have with anybody for advertising. So it's not a surprise if for some reason it does get.
I'm guessing the contract would reflect the policy, but
Well, no, I wasn't, but I'm just saying, when we do an advertising contract with someone, there should be similar language to this in that contract. If someone's paying us for advertising.
right, no, but I'm guessing that the advertising contracts already reference our advertising
Oh.
policy, which has that language in it.
Oh, okay, fine.
I don't know
So
that
by
for a fact.
reference, so you're thinking by reference?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think by reference.
Okay.
I always hate when we put language in two
Well,
places, because then we get it messed up.
Okay, so let's go back to page 1.
There's just one thing, and maybe this is minor, but it's
Yep.
under recognition here. There are specific donations to the school district of specialized items, aquarium tanks for marine robotics, for example, where the district may wish to recognize a donation by placing and I know this is minor, but a small plaque, and the word small just kind of gets to me a little bit because it's so arbitrary. I think a iPhone, I think this is small, I think, this is small. My recommendation I would just say just a plaque. They say, well, how come it's, the size of iPad mini? I think it's reasonable to say a plaque is a plaque.
Yeah, so I think I'm fine with that, since basically as part of the recognition, you'd have to submit what it is you were going to do. So if
So
we didn't
once
like the
again-
size of
Yeah,
it, we
I
could
mean-
say.
Where is
yeah,
it?
Plaque.
That
Under-
is
So I would
on
omit the word small.
Third page.
Third,
Yeah,
Under
the word
recognition.
small,
Second
paragraph?
Second page, isn't it? Under recognition.
1, 2, second page, yes. And under recognition, first paragraph, third line.
okay, got it.
Have you guys been in the lab and see what's there now?
I haven't been up there recently.
Yeah, I was there a few weeks back, and I thought, forgive me BAE, but I thought it was pretty big on the front of that tank. And maybe, could be 18 by 24.
Did you still see into the tank?
If you get close enough, well, it's a big tank, but yes, you can. But it's a good
It's a pretty
point.
expensive tank.
It is, so, but, so
Well, I think when they
So-
bring it to the
a
board.
plaque
for
like this
approval-
would be expensive to make 8.5 by 11. You know, if that's the sort, you know, I don't know, I think, you know, appropriately sized or something.
Well, but as part of, the second part of this sentence
Mhm.
basically says that when they go to get the approval of the board, that they're gonna have
Oh.
to tell us what it's gonna look like, right? So
Mhm.
when we approve the recognition, we'll be approving the plaque at the same time, right? So we'd have input onto whether we like that or not.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Can I just speak to process for a second? So the way this came to be was that the Charlotte PTO came to the finance committee to talk about fundraising they wanted to do for Charlotte Ave. And the finance committee made most of these changes. And at that same meeting, Dr. Mosley had brought up that was bringing things to the policy committee relative to sponsorship. So we tried to make it fit both. I think there was some question as to whether you thought this covered what you wanted to do. So are you comfortable with that now, that this does it? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So let's go back to page 1. There wants to be a change to the title, advertising, sponsorship, and the words "and recognition in schools" be included, so I have no problem with that. When you have a problem, speak
Excuse
up,
me.
okay? Yep.
Isn't it really sponsorship recognition that we're trying to accomplish here?
Well, there's 3 definitions.
Advertising.
So sponsorships are different than
Just
recognitions.
Okay.
Sponsorships are more,
Okay, no,
somebody
no.
gave you money towards something.
No, I was thinking of the playground over at Dr. Crisp, where some people gave a lot of time.
Uh-huh.
And that's, of course, a recognition we
Right.
want to accommodate. And, you know, other people can give money, other people can give time, service. Okay, fine, thank you.
All right, so the word definition has been struck, and then a paragraph added. The policy covers the rules that govern the ability of an outside corporation, business, or individuals to have their name and/or logo displayed at school district facilities and/or on school district grounds. Then the title definitions is added below that. And Mr.
Elizabeth, you need excuse me, Elizabeth, if you've got and/or with a slash, there's a second and/or that needs a slash to be consistent in that line.
Okay, I got it. So then Dr. Jamal added an S to the words benefit in the next paragraph on advertising. And no other changes until we get down below sponsorship. And the words recognition is defined as displaying a person or company's name/logo as a way of recognizing their support to the schools through the donation of goods or services as part of a charitable event. Then sponsorship has been struck, and the next paragraph has been struck. And I believe those are all the changes to page 1. Any questions on that? Any suggestions, or anybody have any problems? All right. So since this came from the finance and ops, I wouldn't expect them. So then on KHB, the second page, we have a page mark that needs to be fixed. Donna? Okay. And then we drop down to below use of advertising revenue, and big paragraph on sponsorships and recognition. The paragraph from page 1 has been moved here, and then recognition has been added, correct? The big long one. Do you want me to read it, or? That's a big long one. Let's see. There are specific donations in the school district of specialized items, aquarium tanks for marine robotics, for example, where the district may wish to recognize the donations by placing a plaque at or near the donated item. The superintendent should recommend to the board as part of the donation approval if a recognition will be included and the design on said recognition.
I think that should be of said recognition.
Obviously, okay. of the set. Air conditioning approval
And
by,
there needs to be a comma right at the second line, marine robotics, comma, for example.
Okay.
well, it's in parentheses.
Approved by the board.
But grammatically, you need, for example, to be set off in opposition to
Sure.
marine biotic.
Okay. In recognition of the tremendous work that our PTOs do to support our schools, the board will allow the PTO to use the ability to display individual/organization/company names and logos on commemorative bricks and on playgrounds signage/plaques. PTOs must obtain approval from the Board of Education for the detailed plan on where bricks will be placed and/or the location of signage and plaques prior to any fundraising activity. Furthermore, the superintendent has the right to reject a recognition that promotes the use of tobacco, alcohol, illegal drugs, gambling, or weapons, contain vulgar and plainly offensive, obscene, or sexually explicit language, advocate the violation of law or district policy, advance any religious or political organization and/or message, promote, favor, or oppose a candidate for elected office or other political issues, be associated with any company or individuals whose actions are inconsistent with the district's mission and goals or community values, or otherwise be in violation.
So that probably should be set off from that paragraph, because that, like the rescind thing, is also you probably shouldn't say furthermore. Maybe there should be a limitations, and then under that, you could have this and the ability to rescind.
So,
Where do you see furthermore?
Where
Oh, I see.
that last very long sentence was written by a lawyer.
Oh, it was?
so that would be a new,
How
become a new
did we ever
paragraph?
exist without having
that?
this in
Would
here?
become a new paragraph?
Yeah, and a new
Under
section.
a new section.
A new section.
New paragraph, and the title being
Limitations.
limitations.
And I don't think you need the word, like you were saying,
You don't need further.
you don't need
No.
furthermore, you could just say the superintendent.
Strike furthermore.
Is go-
And
Yes,
then-
Doris? What, Doris?
You've got grammar mistakes. You've got that promotes with an S, and then you've got to go down through there and look at the other verbs. Advances with an S. There's 2 or 3 of them in there. If you're going to have an S on the first one, you've got to have an S on the other verbs.
And I think also the word contain should have an S, contains,
Promotes.
advocates, advances. Is that what you were speaking of, Doris?
Yes.
Promotes,
This one
favors,
includes
yeah.
Degree in person and number. Yes.
In my defense, I did just move the language that was already there, but
Oh,
should have
Tara,
thought that.
Tara can.
Bob, we didn't catch this at finance, okay? I was there too, okay?
Tara
I'm
can,
usually in on these.
Tara can make it good English, okay?
I get that.
Or well English, no, good English. And then we'll have the rescind paragraph that we talked about before.
You're intending to use that entire long, drawn-out definition of what you talked about before? Because I was listening to it and my ears were falling asleep. And I think that we could do a better job with that. I think it's a good idea, but I think we could do a better job of, what is acceptable and what isn't, by using something similar and not so lengthy and drawn out. Because whoever's going to be staying there and reading it, it's going to take too much time. Such a lengthy, drawn out thing,
Which-
that you're trying to cover. You could.
The recognition
Try to,
section, Bill?
You can insert a thing in there that, the policy will be, this product will be rescinded if the move forward too. But we can do this in a much simpler form, so that it does not require this lengthy reading of the, what, obvious definitions of something we should say community standard, or standards proposed by the, as endorsed by the Board of Education, rather than, all of this verbiage.
Well,
which is unnecessary.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick.
Okay, so I just want to clarify that I believe Mr. Mosher is talking about where we're going to start a new paragraph, limitations, and it's very explicit in the things that are unacceptable. And he's suggesting that we don't need to have each thing spelled out, but just to say a phrase that says anything that's unacceptable to district or community standards, something like that. But now you know where he's talking about.
Yes, I
this.
do,
Okay.
but I believe Mr. Hallowell said it was written by a lawyer.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's,
And that's where you run into a problem, because lawyers are always over-verbalized.
well, I guess I would ask, if I'm somebody reading the policy, how do I know what things are allowed? I have to go to the Board of Education and ask them,
What they think is unacceptable?
You know,
what
the
does,
board can explain very briefly what is acceptable, what is.
well,
Same thing, the principal is in charge of the school, and he would know what is acceptable or not.
I guess my point is it means someone has to take action above and beyond actually reading the policy.
That's a very good
Well, I
point.
think that the community as a whole would certainly be aware of what is, the acceptable standard for the school, the city, and et cetera. And, when you make the application, I could look at it and read it and say, well, we can't do that because this violates, because it talks about, alcohol or tobacco or whatever it is.
Mrs.
You don't have to
Fitzpatrick.
put out everything and just lay it out on the table. This is not a menu for a restaurant. You're going to explain in detail what the chef used concocting his recipe.
Mrs. Fitzpatrick.
And we don't need, like a Chinese restaurant, need one from column A, one from column B. That's unnecessary. And make it simple so people can read it and understand it.
Well, I could
think that's
understand
what
it.
kind of
Maybe I,
Restaurants in general doesn't necessarily have to be
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Asian.
maybe I didn't
Arab
read it with
descent,
enough
right?
enthusiasm, Bill.
Well, maybe so, but, I think that we're better off if we look at the KISS principle.
Yeah,
And be guided by that, at least guided by it, not, have to lay out the whole thing. Why not just take out a 4x8 thing and hang it on the wall and list of do's and don'ts?
Well, the HR director might have a different opinion because of sexual harassment and all that other stuff that we have to abide by, but
Yeah, we have, we know we have to abide with the stuff, but we don't have to spell everything out in detail. Why not, all right, if you want to spell it out like that, why not put it in Braille too? Because we're
Okay.
just willing to offend the blind person because it's not there.
Well,
so can I,
yes, you may have,
Okay.
if you pause long
so
enough.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Mosher, but I think that part of the reason that the attorney suggested such explicit language is because there's very little opportunity for people to misunderstand what's acceptable when we're explicit in detailed and what is not acceptable. And in our changing society, not Nashua specifically, but in our changing society, I think more often you can be explicit in what's not acceptable, that you're less likely to have problems.
Well, to a small extent, I would tend to agree with that. But I still think that, instead of going for that legalese, body of the first part, now let stuff, that we specify to the attorney who's going to review this to keep it simple. Because people are not stupid. They're going to be able to understand what you're getting at without beating around the bush with all this verbiage.
Well, Bill,
At least I would, and I think I'm just as smart as the average person. Or maybe
yeah,
smarter.
Bill, but we get into trouble sometimes when things are not spelled out in
Well,
detail.
And, you may be right. And sometimes you can get in trouble for some things, because there's the sin of omission. But let's say people are going to read it and they're going to understand it, which I certainly would. That there are certain things you do and you don't, and that's the only way
Did
to
you
find
already-
out what you do and don't is
Did
when
you
you
already
make the
send this to-
application.
The lawyer?
I don't think you overdoing
I'm
it.
saying this language was put in the policy originally to meet the legal, so this
Legal
is when
standard.
this was created prior to us. This is
So-
not new language that I put in. I'm saying that that's why that
Why-
language is there.
Why is it
We have a
It's
red
just
then?
moved.
problem with it.
It's
Right.
moved.
Because it's moved?
Yes.
Bill, it's already been a policy for years evidently.
Since 2010, according to.
Well, that was the last time it was approved, so. All right, does anybody else have anything else to say about this policy in edits or what? Mr.
Just a
Conklin?
general question, since we're adding this section, we move things around. I'm curious, are you going to bring this back for a final
Yeah,
pass, or?
yeah, I kind of misled Dr. Mosley about having it approved tonight.
Okay.
Sorry about that,
Well,
It's
can
all
I,
right.
but it's in the works.
can
Yeah.
I suggest, could we not forward it to the full board with the corrections in the evening? We could the committee could make sure that it's okay?
I would prefer not to do that. I would
For the
like
record,
to,
I prefer to do that.
well, I'm not going to ask for a vote on this to approve it until we see the final version. That's the policy that we've used all along, so. Is there any reason why it can't wait another month?
I guess my only concern is the Charlotte PTO. I guess if they know that it's coming, because they're already trying to do, the reason we tried to get it to you quickly was because they're already trying to gear up and raise money for their playground, and they would like to use the ability to do some of these things in their fundraising.
I don't see if they get an early copy of this,
Well,
what the problem would be, but.
Even if they get an early copy, I don't think they would be allowed to proceed because the policy isn't in place yet.
But there is a policy already in place.
But the policy doesn't cover this, that's why these sections were added.
Well, I really would prefer to see a final version, so that we all know what it looks like and we give it another look at it.
I'm just thinking, can I just think compromise, just thinking.
I'll make a
compromise.
suggestion.
Can I-
But Dr. Mosley speaking, Bill.
Just thinking out
Oh,
loud.
I'm sorry.
Just thinking out loud. Is it possible to reschedule another policy meeting next week? And I think we're going to be, we have the HR meeting next week. We potentially have another meeting next week. Maybe rather than waiting a month, we could have another policy meeting. Just thinking out loud in terms of compromise.
For this one
Well,
policy,
For all, yeah, I mean, yes, for the policies we talked about tonight, and then make minor edits.
I'd have to ask the administration if they're willing to do that.
Yes,
Yes.
if that's something
Okay.
if that's a compromise. I'm just putting it out there.
All right.
Does that work for you, Mr. Holloway?
Well, yeah, I was going to suggest, I mean, sometimes with the HR committee, we'll have a 15-minute meeting prior to
Yeah.
the regular board meeting if we want to make sure that only the policy committee gets to decide. That's the other option.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a real problem with that, and I'll tell you why. All of a sudden, certain proposals by specific people are getting priority through the board. This
Yep.
happened at a board meeting, our last board meeting, where there was a draft document presented to the board for consideration, and it skipped over from the normal referral to the HR committee, to the HR, whatever. I think whatever committee it was supposed to go to, it didn't go to that committee. And here we are again at a policy committee. I think Ms. Van Twyver, as the 2 years that I've been, associated with your committee, has been very consistent in making sure the committee's work was complete before it was passed on. And and that has sometimes led to longer than we want, but it's a consistency that I fully appreciate. And I personally don't think 1 month is going to make that much difference in the fundraising, and I just really don't like this idea that we're readily willing to hop over policy because the administration wants something done quickly. We're not doing that for board members. We follow our process. I think we need to follow the process for everybody.
Mr. Farrington?
I'll let Mr. Howell speak for it, it's his committee.
Yes.
Um,
Mr. Howell.
I guess I don't know that it's so much administration as I feel an obligation since the Charlotte PTO came to us, to the Finance Committee, that they're eager to get going on this. I don't know where they stand. We could certainly ask them where they stand, but it was probably 2 months ago now that it was at the Finance Committee. So we can say that another month doesn't matter. I feel like we haven't made dramatic changes here. I think spending 15 minutes reviewing whether it maps to what we think, and if you don't move it forward. It doesn't seem to be a radical departure, but maybe that's why I don't come to these meetings.
Yeah, but the problem is that we, like Mr. Coffin says, that we make changes and then they get to be a habit. And I have tried, in the 2 years that I've been chairman of this committee, to have one meeting a month and to do the business in 2 hours so that we don't have to have so doggone many meetings. And it's unfortunate that they didn't come to you sooner with this, but we started working on Dr. Mosley's stuff, was it last month or the month before? September. And you know, things take time. And we rushed through too many things, I feel.
I've said my piece, Ms. Van Blyver. We want to move on.
Okay.
Can I say something just for the record?
Yes.
I think I agree with Mr. Hollowell. I think that it's very clear where we're standing on this policy, and I understand and respect the chairman's habit of redoing it so everybody is clear and waiting another month. Move this one forward because I think it is already clear, and I know it breaks with her protocol, but I would prefer to get more things done. Worry so much about limiting the meetings. If we can't get things done, we need more meetings. But I'm happy with this one, and I'm comfortable moving it forward to the full board as we discussed tonight.
Well, make a motion then.
Then I move that we accept KHB as amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Roll
Aye.
call.
Oh,
Here's my book. Thank you for reminding me. Wency votes yes. Mr. where are you? Hallowell.
Yes?
Ms. Van Twyver votes no. So the motion was to move this forward as we amended tonight to the full
Yes.
board? Is that correct?
yes.
Yes.
To the full board.
That was the motion.
Okay.
Ms. Van Twyver, if you'd like, I will meet with Tara tomorrow to make the changes and send it back to you to review before we put it into the packets. Does that sound good?
That's fine.
Okay.
So this one HR.
I believe so.
Okay, so that will go to the next meeting of the Board of Education, full board, which is on which date?
30th.
The 30th? Okay, thank you. So, next one is Human Resources Committee, which is BDEB. This has been around for a little bit, and the only change to this that is being asked for is paragraph number 5. Every member of the board shall be invited to observe all rounds of interviews of candidates for these positions. Anybody?
I'm against the change in language.
What do you mean by the, I just want to make sure I don't repeat what you just said.
I'm against the change in language.
Like you don't want to change the language?
No.
I would like to move that we accept the language as amended in BDEB.
I guess I'll just, can
You may,
I, can I just?
Is there a second
I
for
thi-
the motion?
I'll second it for the purpose of discussion.
Okay. I think that this, I understand where board members want to come from with this, but I think this is problematic. So I would just recommend not having it in there. I think that for some of the faculty, it's been a challenge to really have a discussion around some of the candidates. There is, the feedback that I've gotten is that the faculty feel that they don't want to say something that might offend the board members. Also too, because of what's happened is that when the candidate gets to the board, some of the board members have already seen the candidate go through a couple of times and have made some, I would say, early assessments of the candidates. And I would ask the committee to consider, and I know how some of the committee members here feel, but actually striking this particular sentence from the policy. That would be my recommendation. I think it has created, I think the intent is for observation, but I think as human beings we tend to make observations and assessments of candidates, and I would like the board or the committee to consider striking it from the record.
The complete line? Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, I would ask that we go into a non-public session to discuss this particular proposed change.
Is there a
Under what-
second?
Under what?
As it
RSA?
relates to, let's see, as it relates to, well, let's see, we could do it under 91A32C, matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a BOE member, unless such person requests an open meeting. Also, the hiring of any person
Well,
as a public.
you can only go in under one.
Okay, well,
So
take your
you're-
pick.
Can I just inquire, you're going to use an example to show
Yes.
why this should happen?
Yes,
Okay. Aye, a second.
thank you.
Wait a minute, he's not on the
Oh, you're
committee.
not.
Oh, no, sorry.
Then I'll make the motion for him, and then Mr. Hollowell can second it.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
If you-
Mrs. Hohensie is a yes.
Yes.
Let her
Mr. Hallowell
Yes.
is a yes. Ms. Van Twyver, I guess, will be a yes. So we are in non-public at what time?
6:30.
6:30.
Thank you, no problem.
We'll,
Oh, hold on. I have to
Wait,
pause
we got
this.
more people coming. You won't be out there alone.
we're now out of non-public. I need a motion to seal the minutes.
We changed that.
Motion to seal?
Move to seal the minutes under RSA 91A33.
Second?
Hallowell and Hohensie. You guys are the best motion makers and seconders. So, Mrs. Hohensie, you vote yes?
Yes.
Mr. Hallowell
Yes.
votes yes, and I vote yes. Okay, so now we're back to B, D, E, B, and the motion that's on the floor.
Okay.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry.
I missed that one, sorry, thank you. Hang on.
Mr. Hallowell.
Yeah, so I had a question for the superintendent prior to going to non-public. I just want to be clear. I think what you were saying was you would like to see not double negative, not to add the language for every member, but to also suggesting that we remove the line before that, or not?
I would like every member, anything that's, I guess, not that. Every member of, I guess it says the school board, every member of the board shall be invited to all rounds of interviews of candidates for these positions. I'd like that to be removed.
Okay,
Consider
but
for-
not the line before it. You're okay with the Human Resources
Yes.
Committee chairman or designee. Okay, I just wanted
Yes.
to make
Oh,
that clear.
I'm sorry, I was trying to process what you're saying, yes.
Yeah.
I'm fine with
I didn't say
that.
it very well, so.
Okay. Fair enough.
Mr. Farrington.
I'd just like to be on record, I believe I've been on record, every time this has come up, I voted against it. I'm in total agreement with Dr. Mosley, and I believe Mr. Hollow is of the same position. This is just a problem, and it needs to be removed. We need to go back to where we were with the chair or designee from the HR committee.
And it's still, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's fine.
And just for the public, there's still board members on the HR committee. So there's still that oversight.
The other thing that I find that it's, it kind of limits those people who can't attend the meeting. It gives them, those that do attend have more information about it than the others, board members who don't. So I kind of find that limiting, but Mr. Farrington.
But it goes beyond that. It goes to, it isn't really our role as a board. We hired Dr. Mosley and his staff. Those people are people that, well, he hired the staff. But we hired them and expect them to do this. This is their job, and as they're hiring people that they expect to carry out their vision of how to run the district. And we can't hold, I mean, the only person we hold accountable is Dr. Mosley, and we can't hold him accountable and not allow him to have the latitude to select the people that he wants to work for him. And so I think that we have, I mean, the board can be looking at things like curriculum, things like that, but just my own view.
Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. Well, to Mr. Van Twyver's point about some members can make the meeting and some members can't, that's true for any committee meeting, right?
Mhm.
That's true for policy, curriculum, HR. We don't have to be at all meetings. We have a committee assignment, and we are obligated to those. If we attend another committee meeting, like I am tonight, I'm not on this committee. I'm here participating because some of these issues are important to me. I make the time and I have a voice. As far as Mr. Farrington's comment, this is not about teachers. I just want to be real clear. Okay, this is not about the teaching staff. These are for the director and above positions. So you have directors, assistant superintendents, principals, assistant principals. So it's for the people, the administrators, if you will, the staff that the board by its own policy, and I don't know if it's state law or not, we have to approve these people. We have to vote on them individually. We conduct interviews and we interview them. There's many cases, and for all these cases, there is a public interview at the end. The last step should be a public interview in all these processes. So the board is being asked to vote on these people. I think the board members that have the time or the interest, that want to attend and be as informed as they can, should have that opportunity. This is about opportunity. It's an invitation. It doesn't require board members to be there. It says if they'll be invited to attend. If you can make it or not, you can. So I think the board, in order to perform its due diligence to the best of its ability, should have the ability to attend these things.
But these meetings, these interviews are not recorded. I mean, I might not attend a
That's
board
right.
meeting, but I can watch it later on. So, I mean, there is a little bit of unequal.
All the more reason you can make the case that being more fully informed by attending will bring you to make a better decision at the end when the candidate is
Yeah,
presented.
but if I can't get there, or if I can't be there, then I don't have that opportunity to get that extra. I've been against this ever since it raised its head here. I just think that we have too much to say about how the district interviews their people or takes, that decides on who they want. They have to work with these people, and
And they have to work with us.
No.
The district level people, directors and above, interface with the board. That's why we approve them, otherwise we wouldn't approve them.
well, I believe that it's the people that the administration has to work with. And I wouldn't, if I was in, say, her position, I wouldn't want somebody that I couldn't work with.
So is it logic, then why not make update the board policy that says the board will not interview any directors or above? Because that's really what you're saying.
No, we're
by
not. The HR committee chair or designee shall be invited to participate in all rounds of interviews of candidates for these positions. So we do have a say.
Okay.
May I say something?
Sure,
Please.
you may say something.
Thank you. It's just hard. I can't raise my hand. I agree that the understanding that you get from watching multiple levels of interviews is critical for these positions, director and above. These, again, are not teachers. So if we want to fully understand who we're electing, sometimes just that one last interview at HR isn't an in-depth enough. You don't really get the feeling that you know the candidate. You're not as confident. Whereas if you go to the different levels of the beginning process, you know the candidate, and you're a lot more confident when you hire somebody that you're really doing the right thing for the district. So I found it very beneficial. I think it also adds a little bit of a training for the HR committee members or the board members, because HR only sends one person. What if that one person isn't reelected? If they don't come back, all that institutional knowledge that they built up doesn't pass over to another board member. So observing and watching the process is very beneficial to board members as they train themselves to do a really good job. And I don't know if you'd
I don't understand, Ms. Johansson, why you would want to vote against what the administration wants. Don't you want them to be successful? If they bring forth a candidate for us to nominate or to approve, it's because they like the person and they think they can work well with them. They think they can get the best work out of them. It's not, and we don't work with them that closely. We go through the superintendent. It's his responsibility, and when it comes to his evaluation or her evaluation, he's gonna be responsible. I just don't understand why you feel that you would work against them. I been happy with every one of the ones that have been brought forward to work with the administration. I want them to be successful, and your opinion is important, but
I'm not asking them not to be successful. I'm not asking that the candidates don't work with the administration. I'm just trying to make sure that I, as a board member, am fully informed and confident that my vote is for a good candidate. I felt better having multiple interviews with a candidate, knowing that they were the best that we could provide to the district. When we did the superintendent interviews, we as a board as a whole interviewed him more than once, and the other candidates more than once, to make sure that we were confident that we were selecting the right person. So for me, it gives another level of clarity.
But Ms. Johansson, you only,
sure.
yes, but that is the only employee that we hire and have control over. And,
Well, that's not correct. We hire them all, but we have
No.
more in-depth control of the process for the superintendent.
we do not hire them all.
We do. We have to
You
vote
guys-
on it.
Yes,
you
we
guys
do.
are getting way out of line.
What?
What?
You're getting, you argue back and forth like that, you're way out of line. The rule book says that, the only one who is an employee of the school district, that is of the board, is the superintendent. Anybody else, no matter who it is, whether it's Buck Private Jones or, Lieutenant General McCarthy, whoever it is the employee of the district, and the one who is in charge of the district is the superintendent. We can listen to all we want, we can make all the recommendations we want, but who are we? Do we know who is the best one. The only one that's going to know is the superintendent, and it's his responsibility. If they don't work out, it's on his shoulders. If they do work out and it's someone that he wants, then it's on him, not on the board members. We can listen in and we can make informed opinion, but our opinions do not count because we are not trained. We are not in a position to pick out somebody that we like or because we think that they're a good fit. The person who does that is the superintendent, not the board members.
Mr. Hallowell.
So, superintendent is really the one employee that we interview multiple candidates and we make a decision based off of that. Everyone else is recommended to the board by the superintendent, and the board's role is to say, is this person that they put forth qualified or not qualified? I would argue there's not really a need for us to know if there were 20 other candidates. The question is this candidate qualified? So that's why this is the board, in my mind, micromanaging. It's getting down into a level that the board really should not be at. Most of the things that come out of these interactions at these meetings is that a board member complains about the other people that were interviewed, and that's the problem, because the only role we have is to say, is this person that was recommended by the superintendent qualified to be in this position? Not that I have too much of a problem with it, but in terms of equity, I agree with Ms. Van Twyver. I'm still in my working years, and so I spend a lot of time at work. These interviews do not happen at times where I got to take a day off from work to go to these interviews. So I think it puts board members at I don't know, it's a disadvantage, because I feel like I'm advantaged by not having this burden. But I still say it's unfair to other people who might run for the board to say, well, this is one of your duties, and if you're not going to do this, then, well, that's up to you, but you had the opportunity. Well, not everyone's going to have that opportunity. But really my biggest problem is this. I wasn't even in favor, quite frankly, of the chairman or designee always being in the room too, because I am concerned that people who are in the room are going to be more concerned with what the board member might hear in terms of their back and forth or things that they're concerned about. So, as I say, I won't be voting to change this language.
I'd like to comment, if I may, Chairman?
Yes?
Thank you. I think Mr. Hollowell is right in the sense that he says that the superintendent nominates and the board elects. That's state law. The process is board-driven. We created this process. We can change and improve the process. It's not a duty of every board member to attend because they were invited, whether it's the opening of the playground at Dr. Chris or these interviews. But allowing board members to do their due diligence, if they're more comfortable getting to know the candidates better, to make sure that they're, at least for the top positions in the district, that they fully know the candidates that they're voting on. If it's a French teacher or a math teacher, we're not going to even have time to think about or get involved in that level. But this is the top level. These are the leaders, the top leaders of our district. And I, for one, really appreciated not only the interviews, but listening to all the comments to what the teachers value, what the teachers are looking for. It helped me not only in voting for these candidates, but understanding what the teachers want from us as a board in general. So I will be voting for this.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Are you ready for the vote?
There's no motion.
Yes, there is. Motion to accept DEBE and as amended was Doris and me, way back before we went to non-public.
Okay.
Okay? So are you ready for the vote?
Mhm.
Mrs. Hohansey,
Yes.
Mr. Hallowell,
No,
Ms. Van Twyver votes no. Motion fails.
Thank you. Is this going to be on the record that the HR, or not, the policy committee recommends against this, or if there's some confusion when policies get voted down, whether that gets brought to the board to say that
no,
it's against since this went through HR, or is it under new business that we want to bring it forward?
During the report, I could mention the fact that it was not recommended. If it had been no second, it wouldn't be mentioned at all, but we did have a second.
Correct.
And I would, I feel it's part of the report just to say it failed, that we do not recommend. Mr.
Okay, so
Hallowell?
if you don't bring it forward under policy, I would make the request that we bring it under new business, because it went through HR, it was unanimously accepted there, and bring it to the full board one way or the other.
Mr. Hallowell, did you have?
so I guess specifically, it wouldn't show up as a motion under the policy committee, because implicitly the motions from any committee is basically we approve this and send it to the full board for final approval.
Right.
And since that was voted
Correct.
down, it would not be a motion.
Correct.
Nor would I say
Correct.
that it should end up under new business. I guess if it's something you're putting under new business, you're going to propose it. You can certainly propose it. As to whether it sits under there, I guess that's up to the board president or whoever decides that for the.
I believe the policy allows any board member to do that, and I believe Mr. Farrington's in the room, so I'm making that request, because I think it was voted 3-0 out of HR, and I believe there's 2 people who support it, and that might be a majority of the board put together.
Can I just ask the
Sure.
question? And I've given, so just for clarification purposes, do you want this to be back on the agenda for the next school committee meeting? School board meeting, is that correct?
Yes, please, if you could put it under new business so we could just discuss it.
I'm sure the president of the Board of Education has something to say about that.
I was just making a note of it, so when we set the agenda, we can talk about it, so
Sure.
I wasn't trying to.
Well, practically, according to the policy that exists today, if I don't put it on, it can be brought up by an individual board member in a new business anyway. So, I come back, as I'm sitting here listening to all this, I kind of half-heartedly suggested, but I'm beginning to more and more think that we should just do away with our committees and just have the board meet once a week and have a different topic each week. And, all the time that's spent here, just to rehash it again when we think we can get the other votes, but we'll discuss it.
Mr. Kaufman?
I actually have a parliamentary inquiry, I'm not sure who might be able to answer this. If a committee does not, we were in curriculum once, you might remember, Ms. Van Twyver, and there was something that there was no motion, there was no second, yet, and so therefore the committee never approved anything or made a recommendation to the board, but yet it did appear on the agenda of a subsequent board meeting. So I'm parliamentarily asking how is that, it wasn't, I don't believe it was new business, I believe it ended up on the agenda under the HR committee. I don't remember.
Well, the HR committee should have said.
I'm
hey,
sorry, it was curriculum committee.
Well, the curriculum committee is responsible for telling what was
But if the
approved.
committee doesn't take action on something based upon what I
Then
just
it doesn't go
heard.
forward.
But what I'm saying, there has been an instance where a committee did not take any vote, did not make any recommendation, yet that did turn up on an agenda.
Well, you need
So-
to talk to the chairman of the curriculum committee about that.
Okay.
Because
Thank
they're the one, I would hold them responsible for what goes on, what goes forward from their committee.
But okay, fine, thank you.
You know what? I mean,
It's just that a committee vote, here it matters, in that committee it didn't. So I'm, right here, the committee is not, it'll come up under new business.
I'd be happy to
Yeah.
pontificate, but I don't know the specific, I don't know the specific
Well,
thing that you're talking
Do you
about, so
do you
without
remember
that,
the
I
issue
can't really.
where
No, I
either
know.
you nor I voted or seconded and it,
I guess I would argue
okay,
Yeah, hey,
it's not
it's
relevant to
history,
this
but
committee.
okay.
that's, you know, that's the important thing about knowing parliamentary procedure and how to be a good chairman of a committee, and also how to be a good member of the board. You need to know parliamentary procedure. If no motion, if you didn't make it out of committee, then as far as I'm concerned, it's dead. But
Fair enough, thank you. You
we
answered
seem
my
to,
question.
yeah, well, we seem to have more power at the board than we do here at this one, you know? Okay, so that one is not going forward. And the next one is student attendance. JH, do we have?
Yes. You will see that there's no recommended changes on this policy after consulting with principals and head of guidance. There is no part of this policy that we could change and then actually act on because of, we have procedures in place for habitual truancy. We have procedures in place for all of the different definitions. So there is no recommended change to the policy because we have procedures within the schools for dealing with each of these. And it was put on because I guess it hadn't been revised since 2011, and we're supposed to review every 4 years, and it's been 6 years. And after talking with them and looking through the policy, there's no recommended changes.
Yes,
Um,
Mr. Hellman.
So I'm gonna, I don't know how to rephrase this, but
That's
I'm
okay.
gonna move to revise policy JH under the date, to update the date that it was reviewed by the board, reviewed and approved.
Reapprove?
Reviewed and not changed by the board. I'm not really
No.
sure what should be the language.
With no changes.
Are you discussing, I mean, I have a question which might yield a change.
Okay, let's hear it.
So under early dismissal,
Wait a minute.
Wait, so
Parliamentary,
I'll
he needs a second
I'll
so we can
second it for
discuss if
discussion.
we're gonna.
Hallowell. Okay, Mr. Kaufman.
did you get a second?
Me.
Thank you. So under early dismissal, early
Mhm.
dismissal is any dismissal before the end of the day. Do you have to mention the factors that are involved, like a parental request, or isn't that the only way a student can get out of school, really? Early dismissal is via parental,
Yes, and I think that when they talk about the excused absences, it includes dismissals, because if a student, for example, at the high school was dismissed before block 3, then they would be missing 2 classes. So that would be an absence from those classes.
right, so I'm just saying for clarification purposes, you know, it's a parental request for someone to leave early, is it not?
Yes.
Yes, so should that be in?
But is she saying it is? Because if you
Oh.
look under excused absences, excused absences, late arrivals, and early dismissals are sometimes necessary, ...
And then it lists reasons that they're considered excused. And then they list unexcused. So I believe early
Okay.
dismissals are covered under
Okay, thank
that
you.
language.
I just think it's a parental thing. I don't see the word parent in here, so that's what I'm struggling with. You know, it says from a significant family emergency. but- Okay, if you think
Well,
it's adequate,
Because it has to be a legal guardian that dismisses a student. So, you know, their Uncle Joe can't walk in and say, you know, I'm taking so-and-so home. It has to be a guardian who dismisses them.
and this policy doesn't say anything about that.
Because
So-
the law trumps policy?
Okay. Okay, fine.
Okay.
Just
Ms.
ask.
Hensey or Mr. Mosier, any comments about this?
No, I
No
agree
comment.
that,
Okay.
parent or guardian has to be the one to request it, and that trumps the policy, and that's an excused absence.
So is that a hand up? Okay.
Yeah, so I just, we often, the board and administration, if you haven't experienced it yet, often get beaten about the head that we don't have a stronger attendancy policy.
Mm-hmm.
So I take it from the review from administration that we have as strong a policy as we are allowed to have.
The ability to enforce a stricter attendance policy would be unenforceable.
I just wanted that on the record.
Okay.
I mean, yeah,
Can
I mean, it would be.
I have dealt with, can I just, I'm sorry,
No,
I'll cut you
that's
off.
fine.
That was rude of me, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
If you tried to do that, you would then tend to walk and tend the ground, because you would be, in some cases, usurping the authority of the parent or guardian.
I have written and been responsible for the most strict attendance policy when I worked in Brattleboro, Vermont. And what I learned was this, that the students that you want to crack down on are the ones that suffer the most when it's so strict. And instead of, because it was a stricter attendance policy, the ones that were truant 5 to 10 days were now 20 and 30 days, and we lost those students. So in fact, what we had to do is make revisions to allow a lot more flexibility, understanding, and different procedures according to the law to make sure that we try to encourage those kids to come to school to attend. So one of the things that was, just giving an example, is that we said anyone who is absent unexcused had to have a doctor's note. It's pretty simple. I think, I'll use myself for an example, very easy for me to go to the doctors, but for some of our kids, our at-risk kids, it was very difficult to do that. So when we see attendance policies like ones that are presented to ourselves, and we have ones that are presented to us right now before us, I think it's an attempt to try to capture and address all of the kids' needs. And I say it's attempt because it's never perfect. When we talk about, I love the fact that there's at the end of it, at the discretion of the principal, class time missed due to habitual tardiness may be counted towards half days of unexcused absences. Allowing the principal, so that flexibility and discretion, I think, is appropriate.
Mr. Goff?
I do have a question about Section 5 consequences, where it talks about students who might be habitually truant and who have 20 or more unexcused absences, where they can actually be summoned, receive a summons and appear in court and actually be fined a fee. So we were told last year that students at Brentwood, some students 67 days absent. It's just an enormous amount of time out of school. So I doubt we find that person, because if they're not in school, you can't even find them to give them the summons. But, so if we have a consequence, shouldn't it be realistically enforceable? So I ask, is this realistically enforceable?
Go ahead, and then I can jump in if you like.
Okay, well, so I would I say that with the help of SROs, we do try to move towards court action. I will say that, the system is overwhelmed as well, not the school system. So that some of the things that rise as a priority for us as a school district don't necessarily rise as a priority for other systems that we have to work with and within. So I think that this is a good goal to have in there, but when I said earlier that a more strict policy was unenforceable, that was partially what I was referring to.
Mr. Hallowell?
So, several years ago, there was a judge who ran basically a truancy court for freshmen, because there were only so many he could handle, and he sort of volunteered his time. He would come in, I think, on Fridays or something, and they would basically hold court. I don't know that there were fines involved, but it was successful in the sense that you get before a judge and he makes, tells you about things that makes the students listen a little more. Unfortunately, that judge retired, and with his retirement went away that process. I think we did look into the logistics of the courts having a system like that for Nashua or for regionally, and the cost was not supported by the court system. So
Right.
the part you left blank, I will fill in as a board member, is that it's the court system that's overwhelmed.
I'm just trying
And
to
so
be
it's,
politically
this is
appropriate.
not, you're worried about drug dealers, and so they don't have the time to deal with these relatively small offenses.
Wasn't that George Nadeau?
Maybe, I don't recall the name.
Or they held the court at?
No, it wasn't
North?
Bamberger or something like that. Sandra would know, I know.
Before
she
my
knows.
time, yes, Sandra liked it an awful lot.
Yeah, they held the court at the New Hampshire North,
Yep.
in the boardroom.
So,
Can
yes,
And I just want to add that I feel like that should stay in there, but also the paragraph below it is extremely important, because it talks about students with unexcused absences not being able to participate in extracurriculars, and I think that needs to stay in there. I think that's an important piece.
okay, you ready for the vote? The motion is on policy JH, student attendance, to reapprove with no changes. Ms. O'Hansi?
Yes?
Mr. Hallowell?
Yes?
Ms. Van Twyver? Yes. Very good. So that will go forward for board reapproval. Okay, so now we're up to JFABB, foreign exchange students. This came, yes?
I was just gonna say, so I think Ms. Kutu was here specifically for this policy, but she
Oh,
couldn't
she's
stick
gone.
around.
I'm sorry, I didn't even notice that.
Before we went into non-public, I was
Yes.
gonna say, what is she here for? And I talked to her out in the hallway, but by then we had gone into non-public. So I guess I would suggest that we might wanna wait.
That's
She
probably-
seemed to have some concerns over the.
That's a good thing, because the associated JFABB-R kind of got fouled up by me. When I was making changes for it, somehow those changes didn't come through as edits, and the wrong copy of the policy went out. So what we will do then is reconsider this next month, and we'll send out the right copy. And maybe we'll be able to have more information on this policy, because like, it used to talk about a F1, a J1, was it? An F1 visa, which is for cultural students going to college, cultural exchange in college. So we don't do that. But then there was also, and maybe Mr. Hallowell, you might know something about this, about free group-sponsored, ones that aren't sponsored by the United States INS designated sponsor organization. They're called free, I don't know.
Before you even finish your sentence, I can tell you I know nothing.
Oh, good.
Nothing about it.
Well, we're kind of devoid with expertise, subject matter expert on this, so we need to do a little work.
Can I just ask a question though? So the changes that were put in here, was this you, Mr. Fitzpatrick, or who?
No, it wasn't me.
Okay, all right. I was trying to figure out when I read the folks, do you want to allow private sponsors? I was trying to figure out who wrote it.
No.
So that was
It was
you.
me,
Okay.
yeah. That's one of the things that kind of got fouled up when we
Right.
didn't have enough time.
Right, and I think part of the reason was because
You'll
we
see.
had a issue this fall, and it wasn't clear.
Right.
So I think that Ms. Van Twyver wanted to clarify
Yes.
based on this experience.
Yeah. it wasn't clear enough how the process should go, and it does need to be cleaned up. Besides, it's interesting, I thought. This is good. All right. So that will go next month. So,
GBC.
background, GBCD, background investigation and criminal records check.
Okay.
You get to this all by yourself.
No, that's okay. I met with Ms. O'Gara today, and we talked about this, and I do have a procedure question that could lead to a half-hour discussion, but.
You've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So she and I were talking about it, and we do have some recommendations. However, she said, since this is technically a hiring procedure, should it be going to HR first and then to policy, or should it go to both? And if so, which one goes first?
Well, I'm sorry, I would
Yeah.
argue policy decided to take it up first, so
Okay.
they win.
Okay.
Did you say policy?
It's here, so.
Yeah.
It's here, so
Okay.
Well, this is by state law,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yes.
it,
And I actually, one of the things that Ms. O'Gara shared with me was some of the information about criminal records and the update, and it's from the technical advisory that all school districts get from the Board of Education. So the changes that are in here are directly related to the technical advisory that came out from the Department of Education. However,
So sorry, these changes were recommended by Ms. O'Gara? Who made these
Yeah.
changes?
Actually, this copy was something that was presented by Mike Frederickson last year, but
Oh.
never acted upon.
Okay.
So the language changes have been done, but we have recommendations about further revision. Okay. And I don't know if you want to go through it from the beginning, how you want to proceed.
Well,
Because you
if-
said usually you go through, or should I just go through it?
well, if are you recommending more changes?
Mm.
Then why don't we just put this one off until next month too, until you get all your
Did
Oh,
you
changes?
say
well,
yes
it's
or
not,
no?
yes, I am, but it's actually
Is it easy?
pretty simple, yes.
Okay.
The thing that's really from us is on the second page, at the bottom of the second page, it says, "No person with a conditional offer of employment shall be extended a final offer of employment if such person has been convicted of the following offenses as referenced in RSA 189-13-A." What we're suggesting is this, they have X'd out, and this was done previously, a paragraph, but then also the specifics that are in RSA 189 are listed specifically, and we're suggesting that we should just reference RSA 1 as opposed to listing out the 17 specific things in RSA 189. Okay, so that's one of the things that we're recommending, that we just refer to RSA 189.
Yes, Mr. Hallowell.
So, is that because you're concerned that that RSA will change and there'll be other things that are added? Or what's this issue with having the 17 listed?
I guess it feels like it's, for lack of a better word, overkill, but if the board wants to keep the list in there, it's not, you know, it doesn't change RSA 189.
I guess the only reason I like it being in there is
Uh-huh.
that if someone comes to this policy, they'll see the things that are restricted, so they can see them without having to go
Yeah.
and find RSA 189-13-A, which is not
Mhm.
always
Mhm.
rolling off the tip of everyone's tongue.
Right.
So,
Okay, and so then, where, the paragraph below that, it says, in addition to the felonies listed, and it should say above, a person may be denied a final offer of employment if she or he has been convicted of any other felony or misdemeanor. Misdemeanor is the new phrasing that needs to be in there. I think that what it's saying is that these things are an obvious no-go, but then there's other possibilities that somebody could have done something else that's not within here, but still qualifies as a felony. Okay. But the or misdemeanor is the piece that is new that has to be included. And the determination about the misdemeanor, and I think that this language may need a little bit of fixing because I think it's not clear, but what it's saying is that the superintendent has the ability on a case-by-case basis to look at the misdemeanor and then make a judgment about whether or not it's something that would impact somebody's ability to be employed by the district.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we submit a criminal records check to the state police, we give them our list, which is these 17 things. And what I've always been told is they return a yes or no, and then we don't know which one of these things. So I'm curious as to how we would know what the other felonies or misdemeanors are.
You know,
We do.
yeah, they come back like misdemeanors. They're pretty specific, actually.
So I
And
guess,
I want to say that it will now release, it talks about misdemeanors in here.
okay, so that's a
Okay.
change.
Yeah,
to
that's
it.
a
Okay.
change. That's why I said that needed to be included, because
And-
that's a change.
I would guess that the board would not have the ability to, we never see these criminal
No,
record
no,
checks.
no.
So I'm kind of working it through in my head.
Yeah.
So it would only make sense that the superintendent could make that determination because he's the only one who's going to be allowed to see it, right?
Yes. And just be clear,
Are there classes of misdemeanors?
Are there classes of misdemeanors?
Well, I think that's where it's left up to the superintendent's discretion for, it says all class A and B felonies and misdemeanor level convictions. So, that's another piece that's further down about you have to say if you've been arrested versus whether or not you've been convicted. That's another, change. But,
When you think
so,
arrested.
Say again, but Bill, can you start again?
That includes, like automobile infractions.
right, so it's possible, that somebody could, but I'm thinking more of a misdemeanor would be, as an example, somebody is involved in a protest and they get arrested for some reason during the protest, that would be a misdemeanor. Does that prohibit the person?
That would also be a DWI.
That, a DUI would be a misdemeanor, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, I
yes.
think so, I
And
think so,
typically, and if I could just interject,
yeah.
there's a big difference between an employee that got a DUI when they were like 18, 21 years
Right,
old
right.
than when they are, I don't know, 52 or
Right.
443.
Older to know, old enough to know better.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there is a discretion that superintendents typically would exercise. This policy or this change in the law has significantly taken up superintendents' time in larger cities like Nashua, Manchester, and Concord. With smaller districts, it's not a real consideration or a big deal because we're so large. And mind you, all of that information comes directly to me. It doesn't go to HR. So it does, and you can imagine how many employees we have participating in queries and fingerprinting.
Mr. Farrington, then Mr. Kaufman.
Yeah, I just, and Donna touched on it briefly. Down here at page 3 of 4, they talk about convictions and felonies, misdemeanors, and everything else, and yet up there at the top, they talk about just having been arrested. Is that what they're telling us we need to do now? I thought that,
What page you on, sir?
well, on page 3 of 4 is where it talks about all the felonies and the list of 17. And everywhere I believe it talks about having been convicted of any of those things. And yet up on page, I think it's page 1, it says that the person has to indicate whether they've been arrested for or convicted. And I wonder if that is intentional? Do you have to admit you've been arrested if you weren't convicted?
Yeah. So-
That's what it says.
So,
Yes.
Oh, that's okay.
we
that's
we have
all I
this
know.
box, like, oops, okay,
Okay,
I don't mean to interrupt.
no, that's fine.
There's
I
just
think
a-
one of the missing words there is adjudicated.
No, the language on the technical advisory from the Department of Education says that the arrest offense information will set forth the offense the individual was arrested for, the arresting agency, the level of the offense, misdemeanor or felony, the classification of the offense, A or B, and the date of the arrest. It doesn't say anything. So they have to, if they've been arrested, they have to say, I've been arrested.
Even if it was incorrectly arrested.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's tough.
Okay.
Yeah, because you'll get a report back saying that they weren't convicted.
Right.
Okay.
But
Mr. Kaufman?
So, okay, this is great for someone who's applying to the district. But what if someone's working in the district and gets arrested? Is there a notification that comes to the district?
That's a good question.
Because we had an incident last year, there was somebody, but he was doing a...
Or she, just to protect everyone, he or
Okay,
she.
well, they requested a permit that required state validation. And the process
Yeah, I
came
remember
back
that.
and the school board was notified. And so this was an employee who, and it led to a situation that led to a situation that led to a situation. So I'm asking if someone gets that DUI, or if someone is arrested as a DUI, is that notification to the district, and is that person, if I read this correctly, they're dismissed within 24 hours?
Were you gonna say
I
something?
have a vague recollection of someone telling me from another district that in their district, each year they do a background check. So that answers,
They're $50 a piece, right?
yep.
Each year they do a background check?
I'm gonna have to go back, I think I remember what it was. I'm gonna
It's
go back.
a little
Go back
different
and
for.
ask. It must
I-
be, you know,
The answer to your question is, I don't have that answer for you right here.
Okay.
It depends on the situation. If it's a publicized situation, of course we know. If it's not so public, then it might take some time. I don't have an answer for you right here.
Okay, Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you for some language suggestions, maybe clarifications.
Yep.
In this first sentence, second line, where it says any person considered for employment, why not all persons considered for employment? Because when I read this quickly, and then I see student teachers and educational interns, I don't, I had to go back twice to find a regular employee in this. So if we go all persons, that would take care of any and all people substitutes. Now, of course, I don't know, well, I had a background check with the district because I had been a substitute teacher. And when we came on board, there was a discussion if the board members needed a background check. So I don't know if state
Yes,
law...
we do.
Yep.
I got one.
Like,
I'm
alright.
clean.
district-based.
Oh, okay, so that's it, I'm being clear, all persons,
Weren't you
school board mem-
fingerprinted? I was
Well,
fingerprinted
when I,
too.
for substitute, so, okay, so that was my
Yeah,
first
so
one.
they didn't do one in you because you already...
I already had one
it
on
done.
file.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Hill.
So,
Oops, wait a
I'm
minute.
sorry, can I just go back to the,
Mhm.
so as part of the process, each employment applicant, student teacher, or educational intern, I think the reason that student teacher, educational intern are separated is that they aren't applicants. So it is
Correct.
essentially saying all applicants
Mhm.
and student teachers and because it's covering people
Mhm.
that aren't actually applying for something.
Mhm.
Okay, oh, for a position,
Mhm.
okay,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
all right, well, thank you.
Okay, so continue, Mr. Kaufman.
Thanks. Nothing else on that page. And Ms. Van Twyver is very familiar with me and my wills and shalls and mays and coulds and shoulds. So sort of the top of page 2, volunteers not categorized as volunteers will not be subject to, I would say shall, because that's I
Shall
think-
not?
That's me saying, I mean,
Oh, he
that's,
likes
that's the,
shall.
well, I think that there's no doubt about shall.
Yeah.
The next one, however, is that change, persons who have been selected for employment may be hired. You still have an opportunity to say no. And I have a problem with the word will. In this instance, it just seems like you're forcing your hand where in fact you may want some wiggle room, is really what I'm thinking in terms of the district's benefit in this instance. So I would suggest that go back to may. And then when we get to the middle of page 3, after all the red text, the second paragraph, the superintendent.
And it's
Or-
no longer designee because he's the only one that sees.
No, that's
Oh, okay,
fine. No, I
okay.
understand. No, we were briefed on this,
Yeah,
so
okay,
we're familiar
all
with
right,
it.
Okay.
The superintendent shall. You really don't have a choice. I believe the law is very clear. So that's a shall.
Okay.
And I think that was the last one. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I go back to designated volunteers? So somebody who volunteers on a field trip is not a designated volunteer, is that?
They might be depending on if they are part of the volunteer. All volunteers go through the process through HR,
Yeah,
and HR is sent a name by principals of people that are designated volunteers. I suppose it's possible that there could be somebody who volunteers on a regular basis because they're there, but they're not technically a district volunteer.
I guess, so in yesterday's meeting, I think it was yesterday's meeting, Mr. Kaufman asked about volunteers, and I think you might have even asked whether they did a records check, and the answer from administration was yes. And so I'm trying to figure out, who is it that we're not subjecting to a background investigation?
The kinds of people that we wouldn't is if we have a guest speaker coming in, or if we have a parent that's going to be with the group, not alone with students. Those kinds of people we would not do background checks on because we would never get guest speakers.
Yeah.
And they're not alone with kids. So I think that ultimately this is put in place to protect children.
Okay.
Do you think it's important to send out the advisory with the next meeting?
We can do that.
There was, well,
We received it a long
Did you?
time ago.
a long time ago.
I don't think it hurts. Ms. Fields,
I
why
can-
not?
Well, because it does say that you charge for the background check, even for volunteers. But I don't remember whether that was just optional or whether it was a mandatory thing, so.
For us, our purpose, we say you could put it in the policy where it says we may do it in case we ever want to, but it's not at the discretion of the superintendent.
I don't want to
kind of
open
thing.
up any more stuff than I have to by putting out the technical advisory.
So do you want this included in the packet?
Well, I
or-
think it probably should
Okay.
be.
All right.
Are you ready for a motion?
I think you have more changes, right, or no?
Only the shells, and I mean, it's wordsmithing. I don't think there's
Oh,
any
okay.
substantial.
I think we're all ready. I thought you had more.
Move to approve policy GBCD as amended.
Second?
Okay, Ms. O'Hensy,
She said-
Yes?
Mr. Hallowell is yes, Ms. Van Twyver is yes. So this will go forward at the next meeting to the full board for approval as amended.
Sorry, I meant to ask one other question.
Mhm.
On the very end, it says appendix GBCD-R, which is crossed out. And then I looked in our policies, and there is no GBCD-R, which is the procedure that goes along with this. Did we have one and we get rid of it, or did we never have one?
That's a wonderful question.
Yep, we'll have Tara check into that. Okay. Now, it's what time?
Quarter to 8.
You ready to just quit, or do you want to take
Well,
the last
only
two?
other one left is the two that we're not gonna actually do anything on, right?
Right,
There's 3 left.
so,
That's good.
yeah,
I just wanted to ask that the committee consider taking up, I had submitted several policies a month or two ago,
yep,
and would ask that board orientation and the annual report be considered
for the
for,
next one? board
yeah, because the
orientation?
board orientation would, if we were able to move that quickly enough, would actually help us when at least one new member arrives in January.
What was the second one?
Annual report.
Annual report.
And then also, I had planned on presenting tonight that we need to, because there have been legal changes, we need to revise, and it's still a number, policy 3340.1, which is maintaining disclosure of and disposition of student cumulative records. And the last time it was looked at is 1983, and there's actually been law changes that we have to make.
They're mandatory?
They're mandatory, and this is actually specifically, one of the biggest changes is with special education records. And so this is something that Marcia Bagley brought to me earlier in the summer and said, you really need to get this taken care of, so I'm bringing it forward for next month.
Okay. We're building up again, yep. All right, so does anybody have any concern about DDA, KCD, or KCD-R? Nope. Okay, so then I'll entertain a motion.
I'm sorry, I have several corrections, or proposed corrections for DDA. Do you want to take them now? You want me to give you my corrections so they could be considered
Well,
for next month? Or
You can give me the corrections and we'll consider DDA or the other ones that you want for next month. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to be here if you bring those anyway, so it would probably, maybe you can include these in, if they
We'll
make
give them
sense
to
to the
Tara
chair.
and she'll make,
Okay, if it makes sense to
she'll
the
redline
chair.
it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, if you want to give them to Dr. Mosley
No,
or
Tara.
me.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Donna?
Okay.
And is it the same
Overstepping my
with
boundaries.
the
Okay.
Sorry.
the KCDs as well? I'll hand it
you got
over.
one on each of these? All right.
So is it also the case for KCD as well for next one?
If you have a change,
Yeah. You want me to give them,
Can I,
give them to Donna,
Miss
Miss Fitzpatrick, and she'll give them to Tara to
That's fine,
redline
great.
them, okay?
okay. I'll put my name on them so you'll know where they came from.
I've
I'll
got
get
short arms, I'm sorry.
Ms. Van Dalen.
Yes, sir.
Can I just say that, so the only reason these policies were even here was because administration was thinking they were the vehicle for something else.
Mhm.
And I would suggest that they're not a very high priority relative to other things, so
They'll go to the
not
end of the
sure whether
list.
those, right. it's
They'll
just-
go to the end of the list, yep. Okay. I'm tired. You guys wore me out tonight.
I guess one other possibility, Mr. Kaufman, if the policy committee is backed up, this might be something that, since this is relative to the finance committee, as to what we
the
approve
gifts.
and don't approve, if you want us, if you'd like the finance committee to take a look at these instead of the policy committee and then hand it back to the policy committee, that's up to you. Just possibility for lightening your load.
We have bandwidth?
Yeah, I think we always have time to squeeze these things in.
Yep. All right. Is there anything else that needs to come before the committee tonight? I'll entertain a motion to
Move to adjourn.
adjourn. Okay, I'll
Second.
second it. Okay, thank you, Doris. All those in favor, Mrs. Hohensie,
Yes.
Mr. Hallowell,
Yes?
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver, yes. And the time is
7:49.
7:49. Thank you.